Hello, dear friends and adventurers. It's Rob, the D&D wannabe, here with some exciting news. This podcast is now made possible in partnership with our good friends at Misty Mountain Gaming. Veteran-owned and operated, Misty Mountain is one of the largest dice companies in the world. They offer the widest selection of metal, gemstone, and glass dice combined for yourself, that special role player in your life, or your favorite podcast hosts. Just saying. Look for their booth at your next local comic, anime, or gaming convention, or find their products at mistymountaingaming.com. Okay, on with the show.
Okay, Gareth. Everything's fine. You're gonna be great. You've been training your whole life for this. It doesn't matter that you are separated from the rest of the group and down here, trapped in a closet, at the bottom of a cold, dark, rat-infested dungeon. You've done this lots of times before. I'm sure we've been in worse situations than this. It's just important to focus on the next step. You've got to find your way all the way up to the very highest point of the dungeon and rescue the princess. And find that crown that's supposed to help us beat Gormonger, which is guarded by lots of undead and ghosts, and then you have to rescue the party while you're doing it. Simple. Oh, who am I kidding? I am the least qualified person for this. I wish Dooley was here, not so he could help, just instead of me. Oh, hey, there's a light. There's a light coming from under the door. Maybe it's my friends coming to rescue me. Let me just... what is that? It's so bright.
Fear not, small friend. For I am here.
Who are you?
My name is Sir Tinley Awesome, sworn protector of all that is good and holy, enemy of all that is villainous and vile, and gentle lover of maidens fair. But you can just call me Sir. Why are you hiding your face, lad?
Oh, okay, sir. Well, it's just because you're so impossibly shiny.
Ah, you must be referring to my adamantine dragon-scale breastplate of fortitude, which protects me from every conceivable form of assault, made entirely from the discarded scales of the gold dragon that raised me.
No, it wasn't that. It's just something about...
Oh, of course, perhaps my twin longswords. They're both +4 holy avengers. They've seen me through many a fierce battle, and their blades have been shattered many times against my foes. Fortunately, they can reassemble themselves should they ever be broken. Watch this. Avengers, assemble.
Oh, wow, that actually is really great. No, but I was actually talking about your teeth. They're just... How do you get them that white?
Ah, yes. Dazzling, aren't they?
Well, I mean, empirically, yes, they are, but... Look, anyway, what are you doing down here? Are you here to help me?
Help! Dear boy, I'm here to solve all your problems. Why, with me by your side, there will be no despot or ne'er-do-well that will be able to stand before you.
Oh.
Many won't even think to show their faces, I should say. And if they do, then you may rest easily from a safe distance while I lay all your adversaries low on your behalf.
Well, that sounds nice.
Though you may want to watch closely, for it's sure to be quite a show,
Yep.
and I guarantee that you'll want to get the details right when you tell your great-grandchildren about my heroic exploits. Yes, you'll live to see several generations of your descendants.
You know what?
I
I think I'm just going to take my
Since I
chance
will
with
make
the
it my
rats, so...
personal duty
Actually,
to keep you
I'm just going to
entirely
go.
out of harm's way. You'll never need to endanger
You're not
yourself
even
on
listening.
any perilous adventures or risk
okay.
life and
Well,
limb for any daring
see you
do
later.
ever again. I envy you really, new best friend. I'm sorry, what was your name again? Oh, he's gone. I do wonder why that keeps happening. It's so hard to make friends. Don't these people know how awesome I am? I mean, it's right there in the name.
Welcome back, adventurers, listeners, and DMs, to another episode of Bardic, Twinspiration. How bad was that?
I assume that was supposed to be Captain Kirk.
Welcome back, friends and adventurers, to another episode of Bardic Twinspiration. I am your host, Steven, and I am joined this week by our regular co-host, D&D Wannabe.
I have no follow-up for that, but hi. My name is Rob. Host of this, me.
Welcome back, friends and adventurers, to yet another week of Bardic Twinspiration. It's me, Steven, the real reason that you're tuning in every week, and I am, of course, joined by Rob, as usual.
Yeah, I'm also here. Hi. It's me.
Thanks for tuning in yet again, folks. We have another great episode for you this week. We have already recorded it once, and unfortunately, all of that footage is lost.
I suck. Well, I blame my computer entirely, but I recognize it's down to user error. We're still new at this, guys.
Technical difficulties happen, but we are still going to try to make sure that this episode comes out on time. Some of you may remember that at the beginning of our villains episode, we said that a villain was as close as the DM would ever come to having a PC, player character.
Or at least as close as they should come to having a player character.
Right, because the DM is running the villains, the generic bad guys. He's running literally everything else in the world other than the heroes. That is the purview of the players on the other side of the screen who are playing the player characters.
Yep, that's why they called them that.
Exactly. But what does it look like if the DM tries to come across the screen and play the role of a hero himself? That's right, this week we are talking about DMPCs.
Which stands for
Dungeon Master Player Characters.
Which seems oxymoronic from the get-go, doesn't it?
Doesn't it, though? Yes.
Because Dungeon Master and Player, even though they're all participating in the game, technically they're all playing Dungeons & Dragons, you have an assigned role from before the campaign ever starts that one person is the Dungeon Master and everyone else is a player operating a player character, and never the twain shall meet.
Right. Dungeons & Dragons is a collaborative storytelling game. And the way that it is collaborative is that the players control the heroes, and the Dungeon Master controls everything else. They control the enemies, they control the allies, they set up the scenarios and the situations in which the heroes find themselves, and then the story happens when the heroes respond to these situations and this external stimulus that is created by the Dungeon Master.
Right.
So it is kind of a conflict of interest when you have the Dungeon Master fulfilling that role as well.
Yeah, and importantly, D&D is an asymmetrical tabletop role-playing game, which means there's two sides to that coin, and they're not alike. The Dungeon Master needs to play his role and stick to it. The players need to play their role and stick to it. If the players try to run the game, things can get out of control. You'll have that too many chefs in the kitchen kind of situation. When the Dungeon Master tries to become a player, like you said, there could be a conflict of interest, or at the very least, the focus of the story is being divided more ways than it should be.
You know, that asymmetry is crucial to the game, and it's very telling of how this normally should work. The Dungeon Master has unlimited control.
Phenomenal cosmic power.
Phenomenal cosmic powers over the entire world in which their campaign is set, and the players have but a few character sheets.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's a fun and interesting point. It doesn't have much to do with this situation.
So many pieces of paper behind the screen and so few leaflets on the other side.
And I fear that we have already given away our position on a Dungeon Master player character.
No.
But let's go ahead and break this down, because the Dungeon Master is going to control almost every character in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we draw that line between a non-player character and a Dungeon Master player character?
First off, let's say just that phrase, non-player character, NPC, also distinguishes the asymmetry of the game. All the people that the players are playing are player characters. All the Dungeon Master gets are non-player characters. Whatever other role they may fill, monster, NPC, villain, arch-villain, or any others, some of which we'll be discussing at the end of the episode, are not player characters. That's what the N stands for in NPC.
So how does this differentiation become evident? At what point can I, as a player sitting on the other side of the screen, be talking to a non-player character controlled by the DM and say, wait a second, this is a DMPC?
So the line that an NPC can cross, lines I should say, to become a DMPC, I think boil down to their participation in the story and in the party dynamic, their relevance to the overall plot,
right?
How much, air quotes, screen time that they are getting, and their power level in relation to the player characters.
All right, you gave us a list, so that means we have to break it down. So let's talk about the participation aspect. An NPC becomes a DMPC when
Sorry,
their
breaking it
participation... Oh my god. You know, normally when I'm talking, I don't pay attention much to what you're doing because I figure, well, we're going to cut that out.
And we probably will.
Like, you know, you're like applying chapstick or, you know, like scratching your beard and now
chapstick.
And now it's awkward to watch. Okay.
We'll have some long bloopers.
Like 45 minutes of episode and 30 minutes of bloopers. All right, let's break down the participation aspect. An NPC becomes a DMPC when their participation reaches the point of or involves what?
So specifically, a DMPC is not just a powerful character out there in the world. It's not someone who is just relevant to the plot or important to the members of the party. It's someone who is traveling along and adventuring with the player characters, who is in every scene, who is in every combat, who is involved in the decision-making and driving the story forward. You know, player stuff.
Yeah.
When the DM has an NPC who is an equal participant in the adventure, they could be a DMPC.
So what you're trying to say is, if your NPC is getting a fair share of the loot and experience, they might be a DMPC.
Sure.
What you're trying to say is, you might be a DMPC if you represent a permanent fixture in the party.
Could be.
If your DM makes a full-fledged character sheet complete with level, experience, and loot, he might be a DMPC. If that NPC gets his fair share of the magic items, he might be a DMPC.
Especially if he gets first pick.
If that NPC gets a full vote when handling party decisions, he might be a DMPC.
Are you done? Are you done now? Are you proud of yourself?
I reckon.
Are you happy with what you just did?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, essentially, yes, DM Foxworthy. If a NPC is leveling up alongside the party and presents themselves as being owed their share of treasure, loot, and magic items, and if they gain experience like a player character and take levels in player character classes and progress identically and... what's the word for something increasing at the same pace?
Parallel?
Thank you. And parallel to the party, yeah, they might be a damn PJ.
Oh.
Because that's, I mean, you're going to hear me say this a lot during this episode. That's player character stuff. The Dungeon Master has enough to do without trying to be one of the guys, right? You're not one of the guys. You're in charge.
You're better than the other guy. No, you're But seriously, like, a Dungeon Master is not bound by the character sheet. They're not bound by the leveling system. If you see that your DM is confining themselves to those restraints, they might be scratching an itch. Similarly, if that NPC is extremely relevant to the plot, as in they have their own story arc that focuses on them, if they are beginning to steal the spotlight, if they are having equal screen time as the heroes, if you find the DM is having a lot of conversations amongst himself, NPC to DMPC, those kind of things are red flags.
Right, and as far as, like, screen time, how much the story focuses on them, how much they are in the spotlight of your campaign, the Dungeon Master is constantly busy portraying literally everyone else in the world, right? The players only get to drive one character each. If you start having conversations with NPCs as the dungeon master, talking NPC to NPC, handling important topics, making plot significant decisions, especially on behalf of the players without really fielding their input, why are the players here?
Well, I'm probably going to say this a lot throughout the episode. The emphasis of the story needs to be on the heroes, and those heroes need to be the player characters. So if there is a NPC that is starting to detract from the story that is happening that focuses on the player characters, on the heroes of the story, then why are the players even there? Also, if you notice that the NPC you're traveling with far outshines the other player characters in terms of power, that's usually a red flag too.
This is the big one.
If the NPC is capable of solving the problem or spearheading the solution, is it really about the player characters? Is it really focusing on the heroes? Like I said, this is going to be a big sticking point for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely feasible that your player characters are not the most powerful people in your world, and that there are problems that more powerful characters have to go and deal with while the party is handling level-appropriate adventures that matter to them.
But guess what? Where should those things happen?
Off screen, away.
Yeah, again, quotation marks, off screen, yeah.
If you have an NPC traveling with the party, participating in the adventure, who can make all these problems go away, your party members are not heroes, they are spectators, and perhaps cheerleaders at best.
Right. No one's going to pretend that the group of level 1 adventurers are the most powerful people in the world, but guess what? All those more powerful people, they don't matter right now.
Yeah.
This story's not about them. Just think about Gandalf in The Hobbit. He was in and out of that story. He was there when he needed to be to provide direction, to provide information, input, maybe help them out of a jam, but he kept disappearing so that the dwarves and Bilbo could solve the problems on their own, and that's what made those interesting.
Yeah, though he did show up now and again to just fix everything, specifically with the trolls on the way to Rivendell.
Yeah, Gandalf is an interesting example because depending on which point of the books you're referring to, if we assume that the 13 Dwarves and Bilbo are a party and the Fellowship of the Ring is a party, he could be considered a DMPC or a well-handled NPC at different points in the story.
Yeah, I feel like Tolkien, as the Dungeon Master, threw him in as this really cool character he was very excited about, and then realized partway through the story, oh no, what have I done? I'm not letting my players play. I need to find narrative justifications to get him out of here now and again.
Lord of the Rings fans, don't come for us. We know Tolkien's not a dungeon master.
We know you'd like him to be.
Oh man, that's my dream in heaven, is to have Tolkien run D&D for me. Anyway, so now that we have defined our terms and we understand what a DMPC is, and I think we've very, very handedly tipped our hat as to how we feel about it, let's talk about why this is such a big problem.
Right. So, as we were implying and saying, and hopefully you were inferring, the campaign should be the Dungeon Master's gift to their players. This is something that we do for them so that we can all enjoy it and have a good time. If you are creating a DMPC, then you are calling all of your friends over once a week, a few times a month, to have them watch you give yourself a gift that you made just for you. Which sounds like the most self-congratulatory, masturbatory thing that I can think of. That's why I think it's bad. But beyond that, as we said earlier, it can be a conflict of interests. The Dungeon Master has a player character in the party. He's going to want that guy to be cool. And he's in a great position to make that guy be disproportionately cool.
Right. It's like kind of giving yourself a promotion at work. It's basically,
which I did, by the way. I was going to tell you later, I'm in charge of the podcast now.
Oh.
You work for me as an unpaid intern.
And see, this is where we have problems. It's basically self-nepotism. And it's not... This is where I get a little bit wishy-washy, because I feel like
In theory, a DMPC should work.
In theory.
In theory. I've never seen it happen, and I've never heard of it happening, except for one time, and we'll talk about that maybe later. I think that it is just putting too much temptation in front of the DM.
Yeah, we're only human.
Right. I mean, so much so that you've got to give in somewhere. Maybe there's the perfect DM out there who does this, but I argue that the perfect DM wouldn't need to do this. There is the temptation to make your character a Mary Sue. For those of you who don't know what that term means, it is a character who is unrealistically free of weaknesses and or flaws.
So me.
The podcast doesn't convey facial expressions, so I have to...
It does not, but yours is a great one.
I have to figure out how to put this into words.
While you're thinking about that, Dungeon Masters may also be tempted to give their DMPC a new kind of armor called plot armor. And the AC on plot armor is ridiculous.
Plus 10 to everything and advantage on all saves, yeah.
Right, because you make this character and you kind of want that story to revolve around them, and wouldn't it be a shame if they accidentally died? So I'm just not going to let that happen.
You know what it kind of feels like? It feels like playing pretend with my 5-year-old. He's a superhero who has X superpowers, and so I'm like, all right, well then I will circumvent your superpowers like this, and I will destroy you with this obvious weakness that you would totally have. It's like, I'm actually bulletproof. Okay, well, if you're bulletproof, then I will, trap you in this way. It's like, oh, well, actually, I can walk through walls.
Always could, didn't you know?
Right, and that's the kind of Mary Sue-ishness that we're talking about. The thing that makes characters interesting are their flaws. No one is perfect. Everyone has weaknesses. If the DM makes someone who does not have these things, then that is A, unrealistic, and B, not interesting. If they also give them that plot armor that you're talking about to where they can't die or be changed or affected by the story that is taking place, that is also not interesting. That is also not realistic.
I think that's uninteresting and unrealistic no matter who it's happening to. That's my favorite part of the game, whether I'm playing or running, is character growth and story arcs and making sure that you're not playing the same character, even if they have the same name and race and class, that they're a completely different person changed by the events of the story than they were at session 1. And I think DMPCs run an unusually high risk of not having that happen to them.
And also, the DM decides what is rolled for and what's not. And if they kind of have their DMPC not make rolls for things, then they can automatically succeed.
And even if they do roll, oftentimes they're rolling behind the screen, behind a visual barrier, while everyone else is honest and open and rolling out there where everyone can see. DMs lie about dice rolls, guys. It happens a lot. No player character who the story is revolving around, who the success of the adventure is revolving around, should be rolling behind a screen, in Rob's opinion.
I feel like that is such a rabbit hole, and I don't want to touch it right now. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to nod my head and then, But if the DMPC doesn't have the possibility for failure, it's not really a game anymore. We roll math rocks that have low numbers on them for a reason. Failure is part of the game. Failure is part of what makes the game interesting.
And finally, and very importantly, if a dungeon master is aware, as they must be, of the contents of the adventure, of the upcoming challenges that the adventuring party will face, having them piloting a character responsible, at least in part, for facing and solving those challenges is a huge conflict of interests. You can intentionally or unintentionally prepare workarounds and solutions for what you intend the party to face.
Right, and this is a big point for me because I'm most often a player rather than a DM. The DM should be putting forth challenges and conflicts in front of the party without a predetermined solution.
If you, as a DM, can only see one way out, and you will therefore only permit one way out of a given situation that you are facing your players with, then you are limiting their options. You need to be open to the possibility that your players will find a solution that you had not anticipated, and you need to be willing to let that work. If you're like, my players have to have a cleric to get through this combat, or my players have to have a rogue to break into this stronghold, then you are showing a lack of confidence in your players, and you're pigeonholing them into a playstyle that you are prepared for, instead of allowing them to make their own creative decisions.
Or even aside from class roles and character types, if you are presenting them with a enormous gorge that they must cross, and you provide them with the DMPC, who's a level 17 wizard who can cast fly on the whole party and negate the problem in the first place.
Right.
Wouldn't it be more fun to find out how the players, with their resources, might tackle such a challenge?
Yeah, like, go over to that tree over there, bend it all the way back, stack the party on top of the high end, and cut the rope so that it flings them over the gorge,
Sure. Or adventure to the nearby mountain pass and try and tame the mighty rock that flies above its icy peaks and have it ferry them from land to land on their adventures. It's something crazy. Isn't that way more interesting than having some guy cast fly?
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of the catapult idea, though.
Okay, well,
I would love to load my party members into a catapult and just see what happens.
I would love for you to do that. That's in my head, it's a big gorge and a tiny tree, and I'm excited to see where that goes.
You ever see that Bollywood movie where there's like the soldiers who do that? They all grab arms and get on the end of a tree, cut the rope, and they fling, and they turn into a shield ball formation, and basically...
I've seen that clip.
Yeah, they make themselves into a cannonball. Yeah, that's what your D&D party needs to do. Don't tell them they have to get a wizard who can cast fly. Be open to the Bollywood shield cannonball approach.
That is a combination of words you just said.
So, Rob, are there any valid reasons to have a DMPC, in your opinion?
No. Just no.
Point blank?
Yeah, I mean, just no. If this podcast has taught me anything, is that I take hard stances and am very opinionated and also quite stubborn.
But Rob, sometimes I as a DM need a voice in the party.
Do you though? Why would you need a voice in the party? The party is there to be voices in the party. The ideas that they come up with should be able to solve any problem that they are faced with. And if they're struggling to come up with an answer, roll some dice, make some checks. And then if they roll well, give them a couple of suggestions. But let those ideas come from their player characters. Let them be the geniuses. You don't need to be a genius. You don't have to show off. You're running the game.
But Rob, my players are going to try the Bollywood shield cannonball catapult approach, and they'll probably all die, and I'm not prepared to deal with the consequences of that. Oh, that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, there's only so much you can prepare for as a dungeon master, and your player characters are going to present you with some weird stuff. And if that weird stuff goes wrong, you're under no obligation to help their weird ideas succeed. And if they fail, at least they tried.
Right. I feel like failing that attempt is a story. You may TPK, but man, that party will go down in history amongst you and your friend group for TPKing in a catapult attempt to cross the gorge. Failure is fun!
And you know what? As a dungeon master, I get it. You put a lot of work into this story, these villains, these character arcs, driving towards a scene and a conclusion that you are really looking forward to. And then your players just go off the rails and do something weird and get themselves killed like a bunch of idiots, because at our heart, that's what we all are.
We prefer the term foolhardy murder hobos.
Fair enough. That story doesn't have to go anywhere. That villain's still out there, villaining it up somewhere. That conclusion is still coming. If you want to keep playing the game, let's roll up some new guys who happen to be in the neighborhood and find the body of these foolhardy murder hobos with all this sweet gear and say, hey guys, let's become adventurers and do some stuff. And let's not do the thing that got them killed, because obviously it didn't work out for them.
I always thought it would be funny if you have a low-level party that TPKs. The new player characters could be the guys who were assigned to clean that player to clean that party up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the classic example is somebody's younger twin brother goes to see what happened to their older adventuring brother, finds them, and, oh, it's just my size. And I had the same training, and I had the same backstory, and let's go, guys.
Yes, the younger, wiser, vastly superior twin brother.
I see I've used a bad
who
example.
will no doubt have better success in the future.
Yep, I picked a bad example.
But Rob, I need to make sure that my players pick up on the clues that I'm leaving them in this investigation. What say you, dear boy?
So, we've talked about this before, I think, and Matt Colville, someone that we both enjoy taking advice from on YouTube, has said that if there's anything that you need your party to know, don't leave it to chance. I think we even mentioned this in an earlier episode.
Indeed.
If you have clues that you need your party to find, and they're not finding them, that's not on them. That's on you. Make sure that they get it. Don't leave it up to rolls. Don't leave it unto, well, they have to lift up the rug in the Queen's Handmaiden's bedchamber to find the correspondence. Make sure that they have a seamstress who was eavesdropping on their conversation come and reveal the stuff to the party. Or whatever you have. There's all kinds of ways for you to get information to the player characters. You're the dungeon master.
Capital.
I don't see the appeal of that argument. I don't think it holds any water.
But Rob, it's my game, and I do what I want in my game.
Sure. The dungeon master is in charge. There's no question of who's sitting at the head of the table, who's putting in the work, who's behind the screen, and who is in control of the bulk of the game. But it's a game. And when you look beyond the game, it is a table full of friends who are all equals in real life. And it's not the dungeon master's game. It's our game. We all came here, took time out of our busy schedules to sit around and enjoy this experience together. No person at the table should have the right to take fun away from anyone else at the table, because that's why we came here. That's why we scheduled this. That's why we sat down to play, broke out the Doritos, and grabbed the Mountain Dew.
Right. I would argue that the campaign setting is the Dungeon Master's intellectual property.
If it's a homebrew world, absolutely.
Sure, yeah, I did make that assumption, sorry. That the story is the Dungeon Master's. Obviously, as you said, all of this preparation is being put forward by them. It is natural for them to take a greater sense of ownership over the game that they are running for the players. But there is only one aspect that they should not be allowed to touch, and it is the player characters. Without the player characters, this is not a game, and you're not a dungeon master. You're just a writer.
And you just said, the game they're running for the players.
Exactly.
You're doing this for them, not for you. This is not a self-congratulatory exercise. I said it earlier. This is a gift. Okay, soapboxy. I know.
In almost every pre-written adventure, we see an NPC traveling with the party. An NPC participant in the party, I would argue, is actually a good thing, if handled correctly.
Oh, no doubt.
So, how do we handle that correctly and make sure that we don't accidentally cross a line?
So, every campaign I have run has featured what I have called an adventuring NPC. Some dungeon masters call them party NPCs, and that's a term that's out there on the internet. I don't like that because it implies kind of a longer-term relationship than I necessarily mean to imply.
Right, a permanent fixture within the group.
But an adventuring NPC is just someone else out there in the world who sees all this money that adventurers get, who sees all this evil going on in the world and thinks someone should put a stop to it, and is willing to do something about it. Your player characters are not unique in being capable, motivated, and enterprising people in your world. An adventuring NPC is an NPC brave enough to willingly endanger their own lives and accompany the player characters on one or more adventures over the course of a campaign.
Right, so the players are going to go in there and they're going to clear out a dungeon. Maybe they have someone who's going to show them how to get there. Maybe they have someone who's going to help them fight the bad guys in the dungeon. Maybe they have someone else whose services they're going to employ in order to haul all the loot back to town.
Sure. Any of those characters would be an adventuring NPC, or at the very least a hireling who's, they might not be willing to draw steel and jump into the fray when the gnolls arrive, but they're out there risking it for the biscuit along with the rest of the adventurers for a few coin at the bare minimum.
Importantly, those 3 services that I mentioned a moment ago could be provided by 3 separate people who are only specifically able to assist the party in those regards. That will set some healthy confines on their relationship to keep all of these positions from being filled by a single, overly capable individual.
Right. And we'll nail down some more parameters for adventuring NPCs to exist in to keep them from becoming a DMPC. But first, let's drill down exactly.
So let's take a look at some that have been done pretty well. May I?
Sure, go ahead.
Let's take a look at a published adventure. Curse of Strahd. I know. I've only played so many published adventures, and Curse of Strahd is the best one, so it's going to be my example for a lot of stuff. Very early on, the player characters in Curse of Strahd will meet Ismark, who is an NPC who is a capable fighter and who is a quest giver for the players. Notably, he travels with them on an escort quest, but once it is completed, his participation is over. He does not continue the rest of the adventure with them. He is realistic in that he has a set of motivations. He participates with the party because they happen to align, but once his goal is met, he's done.
Right, he wants to get his sister to the town of Vallaki, and the party is his best shot at making that happen. Once that little quest is over, Ismark's happy. The party may try and invite him along to further the quest or bring him in on other missions that they might undertake over that course of that campaign, but that's between the dungeon master portraying Ismark and the player characters at that point. Because as Ismark is written, he's out.
Right. Now, it would be realistic to say that if the players thought, hey, this guy is very capable and we should employ his services, that they should be able to incentivize him to accompany them, or they should appeal to his reason by way of, say, some persuasion checks, or maybe some gold would exchange hands, but then the player characters are actively seeking to add him to the party. He is not being inflicted upon them by the dungeon master,
which is important.
And they are making checks, invoking chants, or expending resources to gain that help.
And even so, if that succeeds, or if it doesn't, Ismark isn't looking to become one of the gang.
Right.
He's not trying to join the party. That's not what Ismark's out here to do. Ismark is bonded to his family and to his responsibilities in the valley.
Right.
Ismark is not trying, I think he'd jump at the chance to take revenge for the sake of his sister, but he's not looking to spend the rest of his life doing this adventuring thing that the party has going on. He's not looking for equal treatment. If the party hires him, he knows the nature of their relationship. If they ask him to do it as a friendly favor, you can only push your friends so far.
Right. There is a finish line. There is a light at the end of the tunnel to the interaction that this NPC has with the party, and if they choose to extend it, then there is just a new finish line.
Since we're talking about published adventures, the Tomb of Annihilation campaign starts with your party arriving in the colorful and outlandish Port Nyanzaru, getting ready to head into the dense and uncharted jungles of Chult. Such a quest is folly, lest you have a local guide to assist you in this journey. You have kind of a pick of the litter between almost a dozen potential guides, and you get to pick which one you want to go along with. And they will have different objectives out there in the jungle. They will have a different relationship with the members of the party, depending on which one you choose. But you're paying them to be there. They're not trying to join the party. They're not trying to get an equal say in everything. They know what they're here for. The relationship is defined. And as you put it, there's a finish line. They know when their relationship with the party is over. It is finite, and that boundary is set.
Be prepared that your players may try to adopt on a permanent basis an NPC. This kind of happened with the caster Critical Role when they came upon Essek Thalis, who was a fairly powerful wizard in one of the towns that they went to. The party really took a shine to him and tried to invite him on all sorts of adventures, but importantly, and kudos to Matt Mercer for doing it, Essek had his own things going on. So he was actually very rarely able to accompany them on any of their journeys. He just provided some aid to get them started, mostly in the form of transportation, which was actually great. I think that he was handled fairly well. He ended up accompanying the Mighty Nine on one or two adventures in which he was heavily invested, but on almost no others.
Right, and he was always willing to offer a suggestion or a kind word, to share resources or gossip, but to stick his own neck out and to help solve an adventure for them? No, that's crazy. Why would he do that? He's got a good thing going.
Right, he was not an adventurer, but he was willing to adventure for things that he was invested in or for tasks for which he was compensated in some way, or with transportation that he was obliged to provide.
Yep, and I'll mention a few adventuring NPCs from some of my games.
Yeah, because you said you've had them in just about every game that you've run. Give us one or two of those.
I think the big three would be from my very first campaign that I ran, which would be Andrew Whitaker, who was in the very first session, and he was in the very last session of that campaign, and didn't miss one in between, except sometimes when he was dead. A temporary condition. He was a little scholar that had information on a ruin across the world, and he hired the player characters to take him to the place so that he could see the stuff. And he was, frankly, not powerful. He was incapable of going on this adventure on his own, and was never, in a spellcasting sense or in a martial sense, the player character's equal. In fact, even with the little bit that he could do, he was a bit of a coward, and generally avoided conflict, not on a moral stance, but on a I'm about to piss myself stance.
So was he involved with the party because this was, quote-unquote, his adventure, but he was incapable of getting there on his own, and so he hired the party? Or what was their interaction? Or what was their relationship?
At first, they were sort of under his employ. He came into a lot of money, wanted to spend it going off to this place, and quickly realized that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow was something far and away beyond what he could handle. But it was something that he, as a scholar, was very interested in. And he wanted to hear and record and see for himself the story that our player characters were about to go on. And really, he could have gone home after that first quest, but everybody kind of took a liking to him, and like you said, they adopted him.
So is he kind of the Dandelion to their Witcher?
I don't think Dandelion was liked by Geralt ever.
Fair distinction.
But not so for Alishea Vogel, who was the younger sister of a player character who he decided he wanted her to be his squire and carry his armor around and learn the adventuring ways and just spend some bonding time, even though he was going out to be a adventurer and live a dangerous life. She became someone who became constantly endangered by her older brother's choice to take her along on an adventure.
Oh, no, like a permanent escort quest?
Almost. That's what he signed up for from day one.
Interesting player choice. I will never make that player choice. Kudos to that player. You do you, my friend.
The story did eventually involve her pretty heavily, but it was never about her, and she was never the one capable of affecting change in the story. She was more of a catalyst, of a tool or a treasure, depending on who you were in the party and your perspective on it. And she was there through the whole campaign as well, but in a very minor role throughout most of it.
And of course, in your most recent campaign, the one that you are currently running for me and a few friends, you have Galen Doak.
Yeah, half-orc cleric of the goddess of rain. He was interested in assisting you guys in getting out of jail because he wanted to ride your coattails to his own freedom.
Because he was also in jail.
Exactly. And as soon as y'all got him out of jail, he said, hey, you guys should come see my hometown. You did. And you said, okay, it's time for us to leave. We're going. He's like, nope. I'm here. I'm home. I'm happy. Y'all go have fun. Come visit. Don't forget to write. I'm out. I'm out of the game.
Right. So he was directly in the party, and he was in every combat, and he was able to participate in any conversation. He was there to answer questions that the party asked of him, but he was also gone in 5 sessions.
Yep.
Like 6 or 7 tops.
It was a quick cameo. And even when he was involved in all of that, he didn't consider himself one of y'all. Y'all didn't consider him one of you. He was an outsider who had similar goals, whose interests were aligned with yours, and who had skills who could assist you in accomplishing what you set out to do, and then he was gone.
And I think that that is incredibly important in keeping your NPC involved in a healthy way that will absolutely not lead to them becoming a DMPC, is to plan their involvement to be short-term, and if you refresh that for any length of time, it needs to be for another defined short term. Let them drift in and out if you like, kind of like Gandalf did in The Hobbit, but they should always have their own motivations and a realistic reason not to be constant adventurers. They should be there as a resource, not as a substitute for the party.
I mean, even if they are a constant adventurer in a way, they're not adventuring for the same reasons as the party. They have their own reason for doing what they're doing. Like, the folk hero will assist the party in defending their town. But when the party is ready to move on, the folk hero stays to keep doing their job. The archaeologist, Indiana Jones, will help you explore this ruin, this dungeon, and get the treasure that's within it. But he has no interest in fighting evil and fighting the good fight and risking himself for the sake of the land. He's in it for the history and slightly for the money and glory.
Great example from a movie that I just watched, Iron Man in the Spider-Man Homecoming movies. Okay? He is obviously a superhero, just like Spider-Man is. Heck, he's a better superhero than Spider-Man is. He's been doing this longer. He has a lot more resources. He is basically Peter Parker's patron and or sponsor. But Peter Parker's problems are not Tony Stark's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, they will align. Tony Stark calls upon Peter Parker to help him with some problems. He gives him lots of stuff so that Peter Parker can solve his own problems, but very rarely are they working on the same thing. It takes Captain America going AWOL or Thanos showing up for them to be on the same page at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great call. Good pull.
So as a DM, I feel that you should take into account that adventuring is a business. It has lots of different people serving lots of different roles for lots of different reasons.
Omendron would love you for saying that.
Who?
The CEO of Acquisitions Incorporated.
There you go. So make these people available to your party. Have a cadre, have a lineup, a smorgasbord of hirelings, mercenaries, followers, interns looking to get their names out there, squires who are looking to study under the tutelage of a proficient fighter, former comrades that these adventurers have worked with before, potential allies, and even fans. available for the party to meet and employ the services of. When I played Oblivion and I became the champion of the arena, and you get that little wood elf guy with the Jimmy Neutron hair
And little shrimp.
who follows you wherever you go and performs little tasks for you.
Hate that guy.
If you get to be like a level 10 or higher adventurer, certainly by the time you're like doing epic level stuff, 15 and above, of course you're going to have fans.
Someone's going to have an action figure of you.
It would almost be unrealistic for them not to. So it actually increases the verisimilitude of your world to have these people available for employ. And you should let your players know, hey, this is a business. These guys are out here. They are available for you whenever you would like to seek them out. But don't hit your characters over the head with an NPC who is just as powerful as them and wants to be involved on a ongoing basis.
Right, and you know what? Maybe your adventuring party doesn't see adventuring as a business. Maybe this is a higher calling for them, or a divine purpose, or a responsibility. But certainly there are people in the world out there who see adventuring as a business. There's whole economies based on this. They're keeping the blacksmiths in business. They're buying the horses and getting them shoed. They're buying up the magic items. They're exploring the ruins and gathering historical artifacts. There's plenty of money to be made in this kind of deal. So even if the party doesn't see it that way, certainly people in your world should.
Right. Are you just going to leave that dragon lying there? Because those scales are worth a fortune. So, hey, how much you want for this dragon corpse? Me and my boys, we'll scale the thing, and we'll, debone it. We'll put the head on some king's wall, and we'll have armor crafted out of the scales, and we'll make swords and daggers out of the teeth and bones. So, how much...
Have you had red dragon jerky?
You want to do all of this yourself? Be my guest. Otherwise, this is my price.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we kind of made our case, and we're going a little long here.
Beaten that horse to death. So let's start wrapping up.
Right. So, in summation, it's great and realistic to have NPCs willing and able to adventure in your world, and it's realistic that some of them might want to tag along with the party for a time for one reason or another.
Yes.
But to prevent them from becoming a DMPC, they should never, be forced on the party. If the player characters want someone to come along with them, they can make that clear. It should never be the dungeon master's decision that one person in particular is going to be equally involved with the other members of the party.
Right.
If you can imagine, like, packing up and getting ready to go on vacation, a road trip with you and the gang, and then some rando shows up and says, "I call shotgun," and throws his luggage on top of the minivan. That's what you would be doing to your adventuring party if you, as the dungeon master, inflicted a character upon the adventure.
Right, you don't want the hitchhiker to show up, take the map, and then start telling you where to go. Like I said earlier, important to me is the NPC should never be the focus of the story. They should never have the spotlight. They should never be center stage. The story needs to focus on the heroes and their character development and their story arc. There can be spectators, there can be side characters, there can be fellow cast members, but they should never run any risk of being the star or detracting from the significance of the player characters in any way.
Also, an NPC adventuring with the party should never be the DM's voice in the party. Now, that's not to say that they can't have a voice. In fact, they need to have a voice, but it should never be your voice. It should never be your opinion or the voice of God in the party. I think if you give a battle-hungry dwarf to the party to take into battle with them, and they come across a strange problem and are debating whether stealth is in order or if they should lay a trap, having the dwarf just always be suggesting to run straight into combat, screaming at the top of his lungs, wearing nothing but his knickers and an axe in both hands. That's not the voice of the dungeon master. That's the voice of some NPC. It's just frankly stating a bad idea. And it's more entertaining if your NPCs don't always suggest the optimal thing, if they suggest anything at all. Yes, if we all should die today, tomorrow we will feast in the halls of our gods.
Come on, boys. Nobody lives forever. Charge!
Exactly. So it's great for them to have a voice. It should just never be your voice.
Yeah, I actually think when I'm a player, I appreciate having a NPC there as a resource for us to ask questions to, but I would probably feel very differently about it if the NPC started telling me my options.
Yeah, or if they always had all the answers. Nobody has all the answers.
Right. Like I mentioned before, very important that no NPC have plot armor. I say this about player characters as well. Your story should not hinge entirely on anyone surviving, because everyone has hit points and things can happen to them, and no plan survives contact with the enemy, but absolutely be the case for your non-player characters. They should all have weaknesses, they should all have motivations, they should all have flaws, and they should all be fallible and, by and large, mortal. Although if you have an immortal NPC, those can be fun too, but they shouldn't be there because they have to be. They should be there because it is narratively compelling or narratively convenient.
An adventuring NPC should also never make the decisions for the party. In fact, I say they don't even get a vote. They can make their voice heard, they can put out a suggestion, but at the end of the day, it's the party driving the game forward and deciding what course of action to take.
The NPC should never be the solution to the problem. They should arguably never even present the solution to the problem. They can assist the players in accomplishing the goal, but they should never be able to do so independently. The player should never be the bystander in any situation.
And you know what? If the NPC is going to be more involved or capable of solving problems at all, that should definitely be up to the players, encouraging them and asking them in as many words to be more of a participant.
I agree. The NPCs should only be as involved in the party as the players desire them to be.
I think that just leaves the big one.
You're talking about the loot, right?
No, we can also talk about the loot.
Yeah.
Because we actually don't share the same opinion on this one, I don't think.
You know, loot and experience are the rewards that you bless your players with for accomplishing the mission. NPCs don't need that. The player characters can decide, hey, you know what, you were a big help to us, and so we're going to give you a cut of the loot. The player characters should be compelled to provide the compensation they agreed upon, or if they decide after the dragon's dead that they need to renegotiate the deal, there should be consequences for that. But just because an NPC is there, they are not owed loot and experience. If they feel that they are, that's different. That's a character motivation and decision. But the DM should not be involved in that in any way.
I haven't had a big problem with this at my tables. In fact, I've had no problem with it in games that I've been involved in at all. And when I am a player, I often reward NPCs who are around when the fighting is over with things from my pack that I'm not using, some spare gold lying around, or magic items that overflow my attunement slots.
As a player, right?
As a player.
Yeah, okay. Just make sure.
But that is something that I am deciding to do. And I frankly can't imagine my dungeon master telling me I had to give up something of mine to an NPC. And if that is a reality for anyone listening to this, I am sorry.
Yeah, if a NPC told me that he was going to get the best magic item that we just found after we fought off all these bad guys,
I'll fight you for it.
Then that NPC just became the next bad guy.
All right, now can we do the big one?
We can do the big one.
Your adventuring NPC should never, capital never, be significantly more heroic or powerful than the rest of the party. The reasons why are plentiful, not the least of which would be that it's just unrealistic. There's no reason that a significantly powerful person should have the same cares or interests as a significantly lower level adventuring party. And if they did have those interests, they wouldn't need the help. So why would they put up with this, what did you call them, these foolhardy murder hobos?
Yeah.
Voluntarily. They would just go and solve the thing and be done with it, and then they wouldn't have to share the loot or the glory or the fame.
Yeah, this is why you see, like, the Avengers broken down into so many groups. Like, going back to my Tony Stark example, this is why Tony Stark doesn't invite Spider-Man on every mission that he goes on. He tells him to stay home and protect Manhattan.
Exactly. This is the kind of thing where Robin can hang out with the Justice League, because Robin is Batman's sidekick. He is not an incapable person, and there are certain things that he can do in ways that he can help and contribute. But he's probably never going to be the guy saving the day. On the other hand, you never see Superman hanging out with the Teen Titans, because the things that the Teen Titans can handle, Superman would have over in an instant. And the things that require Superman's attention, the Teen Titans could never hope to solve on their own. Problems that they can manage are beneath his notice. That's why they exist, is to take care of problems on that scale.
Right. People get pulled up, they don't get pulled down.
Mm-hmm.
You get pulled up to the big leagues. Once you're there, you don't really get demoted as often.
Sure, and you're getting pulled up because the people at that level can take care of themselves and you besides, right? They're going to make sure that they come out of this alive and successful, and so do you. Not so the other way around.
Or the problem is so significant that even these guys could use a hand. Or at least, could help with some crowd control or things. Hey, you know what? I'm going to go and fight Thanos, but he does have an army to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And someone needs to take care of that.
Right. Just because we've got to hit the anime button in every episode.
I got to get an anime button. Is there a place that makes those? Someone tell me. I've seen them on YouTube, like the no button, the nut button, the I'm in jail, or I'm going to jail. Need to find one of those.
But the USJ incident in My Hero Academia, the students are training, and then some villains show up, and All Might arrives to save the day. And All Might has to literally pull his punches at times because there are all these weaklings around that he doesn't want to hurt and whose lives he feels responsible for. On All Might's best day, he wouldn't be in that situation. And a high-level wizard who wants to fireball everything he comes up against is not going to want a party of fighters and rogues around, getting in his area of effect spells.
Jumping up there, getting into melee, yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you break one or more of these rules, you endanger creating that dreaded DMPC who can steal focus from the party, who can be the hero that everyone else is at the table to try and be.
Yeah, you remember when we were talking about DM Tolkien?
Yeah, good old DM Tolkien.
Right, remember how we talked about Gandalf being potentially his DMPC?
Right.
I think there's another one that takes the cake. Think about the Lord of the Rings. If you consider the party to be the 4 hobbits that leave the Shire,
mm-hmm.
Who is the first member of the Fellowship that they run into?
Around here, he's known as Strider.
Right. So they pick up this ranger halfway through who decides to take them the rest of the way to Rivendell. Sounds like he's going to be there short term, doesn't it? Once they get to Rivendell, oh no, this guy's not just the guide who got you here. Turns out he is already leader of the Rangers. Oh, and he's actually Isildur's heir. Yeah, the guy from the prologue who's got all this important stuff going on, all this history with the MacGuffin that Frodo's carrying. Yeah. Oh, and he's the king of the last nation of men down south that is the major player in the fight against Sauron.
Ain't no thing.
Right. So this party gets together, they add in some extra members, and they leave Rivendell. And then the very next encounter, DM Tolkien decides to split the party. Aragorn takes all the cool folks this way, and Frodo and Sam go that way.
Mm-hmm.
While Frodo and Sam are, he gives them another NPC. He gives them Gollum. He's sometimes helpful, most of the time not. And while Gollum is having them, run in circles through swamps and, traipse through the woods trying to find a back door into Mordor, what is Aragorn doing?
Oh, he's having epic battles across several of the nations of men, getting all of the attractive women in the story to fall for him, reforging the sword of his forefathers, and raising an army of the long dead that is, invincible.
Right. First thing he does, he goes on a record-breaking sprint cross-country. Then he frees the king from the influence of the evil wizard. Then he liberates a city and takes them to their stronghold, defends said stronghold from an oncoming army, leaves that stronghold to go and recruit an army of the dead to take them to win the biggest land war of his age in front of Minas Tirith, and then go and take the throne. Then he takes everyone who's left and storms the gates of Mordor. What is Frodo and Sam doing at this time? They are fainting in a wasteland of volcanic ash, hiding from orcs, and honestly panting a lot.
Yes. I'm getting very sweaty.
It's of course, I don't want to diminish the importance or the significance of what Frodo and Sam are doing, because they are the main characters and they are doing the most important job, but it is unquestionably the less exciting part of the story. It's like, hey, here are the 4 hobbits, the main characters of our story. They're going to do all the boring stuff, while the guy that I introduced to you as a guide does all the cool stuff and gets all the ladies and becomes king.
That is perhaps the best example of a DMPC, because just Aragorn gets all the cool stuff.
Does all the things.
Yeah, he's very powerful. He's central to the story. He's got more backstory than anybody else in the place, and he's the cool one.
Right, and he gets the happier ending.
Mm-hmm. And just because, don't think that it makes up for anything that you kneel to those 4 hobbits at the end of the movie, okay? All right, we're not invalidating all of the cool crap that you just did.
Right, like I said, the hobbits are the heroes, and it's nice that he tips his hat to them at the end before they go back.
Did I mention he had a crown?
Right, before he sends them back home to, they have some nice end stories too, I mean, Tolkien threw him a bone there at the end, but it's really the bulk of the story.
He threw them several bones. So many nice endings.
But regardless of how things ended up, the bulk of the story, let's say the adventure, the campaign, all of the interesting stuff happened with Aragorn. So what has your experience with DMPCs been? Have you encountered any? Have you attempted to utilize them as a DM, or have you been subjected to them as a player? Notably, we asked this question on our Discord, and the user Planesrunner actually said that as a player, his experience at the table had been enriched by the presence of a DMPC.
Mm-hmm.
We were obviously very interested to hear about that. We like to think of ourselves as infallible because, of course, as content creators, we are. But your mileage may vary.
Right. So if you'd like to share your opinions, your thoughts about adventuring NPCs or DMPCs with us, you can reach us on Twitter at @Twinspiration. And you know what? If that character count is just too limiting for you, come onto the Discord and use many more words to tell us your story. Link is in the description.
And if you appreciated the ideas that we put forward about how to correctly use an adventuring NPC, don't worry. There is more to come on that matter.
Oh, yeah.
We have plans for a future episode. As a matter of fact, our first guest appearance episode, where we will be talking about ways to have an adventuring NPC or party NPC and use them to your party's exclusive benefit.
I am really looking forward to that. In fact, the only reason we haven't done this already is our guest has just moved into a new place and needs to set up a good recording space. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for that. Until then, if you enjoy the kind of content that we produce, I am a Dungeons & Dragons content creator. As D&D Wannabe, I have an adventure and some articles out there on mistymountaingaming.com. My articles are in their dungeon feed. My adventure is in their shop. Might be something in there that you would enjoy, so I encourage you to go check them out.
And as always, if you're willing to wait a spell, we'll have another episode out for you within a week or two. I guess you'll just have to wait until the next episode.
It's such a stretch.
We'll see you then.
Bye.
The outro music you're listening to right now is called Mega Epic, and the intro music is called Super Epic. Both were composed by the wonderfully talented Alexander Nakarada and utilized under a Creative Commons license. You can find more of his music at serpentsoundstudios.com. If you enjoyed our content, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and review on your listening app of choice. To keep up with us on social media, look us up on facebook.com/Bardic Twinspiration and on Twitter @BTwinspiration. Want to interact with us directly? Come join our Discord. After all, who are we if not people who are willing to roll the dice on making some new friends? Links in the description. Come check it out. You know, I realize that the correct pronunciation of Gesh is going to mean that no one gets the joke at the end. The sign off, the spell Gesh.
Mm-hmm.
The one that compels people to do a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite spells, and I've never been able to use it because I haven't played a high level caster. But
if that's how you pronounce it, I've never been able to pronounce it.
Yeah, I always said Geas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Code Geass.
It isn't Code Geass? I'd watch that anime.
I'm gonna have to think of some more puns.